Hey cactus friends, it's Jenny from Cookie's Cacti. So I've had a couple of people ask me how I sow my cactus from seed, so I thought I would make a video to show you. I'm going to try to break it down into sections so you can go and look for the information that you're looking for. Now, I've been growing cactus from seed for about 1.5 years, so I am not an expert by any means. This is the way that I do it. It doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. It doesn't mean that it's fail-proof. I've had successes and failures all mixed together, but this is the way that I like to do it because I'm very lazy. So when I want to grow, I just want to grow. I don't want to do a lot of prep work. So take it for what you will. In the end, it's up to you to try things and figure out what works for you. All right, so what do I need when I sow from seed? I like these pots. I like these deep pots. I choose the size of the pot depending on how many seeds that I'm growing and the type of plant that I am growing. The next thing you need is some labels, and you want to use pencil to fill out the label. I like to put the plant ID, and if it happens to be from Mesa Garden, I'll put the catalog number on here as well. And on the back, which I didn't write on here, I like to write the sow date. So I'm going to go ahead and fill those out, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So I have filled out the date that I'm sowing these seeds, which is November 27th, 2022. The next thing that you'll need is soil. So I use my standard Miracle-Gro Perlite with Miracle-Gro seed starter mix, which tends to work out for me. So I have a bowl of it already ready to go. I have already wetted it down so that it's moist but not soaking wet. It's kind of the same procedure that I use for repotting my seedlings. I use roughly maybe 2 to 1 of perlite to the seed starter. It works well for me. Again, it's up to you to go try what works for you. And a lot of people use cactus soil or maybe pumice and probably every imaginable mix you can think of. But this is what's really easy for me because this material is so easy to find at Home Depot. It's inexpensive and it just works well for me. I don't sanitize anything. So that soil came straight out of the bag. You'll need some water because I had wetted down that soil. So my water is just tap water that's been acidified a little bit with some white vinegar. The amount of vinegar I add to my water is just to get it to the same pH level as roughly my rainwater. It may not actually be acidic enough, but that's what I use. So I don't sanitize my water. I don't sanitize my pots or anything either because I'm too lazy to do that. So one very important thing next that you'll need are some seeds. You can go find your favorite seeds on the internet. These happen to be from Mesa Garden. So I have a pack of Ariocarpus retusus from Mesa Garden. This is a pack of 100 seeds. I have another one which is a Copiapoa tigriensis from Mesa Garden as well. As you can tell, there are only 10 seeds in here. So I'm going to sow the 10 seeds in the little pot. This is a 2.5-inch pot. I'll talk about where I got these pots from later on. And then the 100 seed pack I'm going to sow into the 3-inch pot. Now, typically, depending on what the plant is, because Ariocarpus grows very slowly, and the germination is kind of hit or miss, so it just depends. So I'm actually going to sow all 100 seeds into this 3-inch pot, just because they grow slower. Now, if these were Copiapoa or a faster growing cactus species, I would not sow 100 of them into one pot. I would probably break them up into like 3 or 4 pots or something. And the reason why I picked these two to demo is because for this case, because there's only 10 seeds, I'm going to hand place them into the pot. For this one with the 100 seeds, and because they're slow growing, I kind of don't care if they're all squished together. I'm going to just sprinkle it, so I'll show you both examples. So the next thing that I like to use, you'll need a little bit of top dressing, which I will explain in a moment. I used sifted and washed decomposed granite. You can see that the granules are small, but not horrendously small. It's like very, very coarse sand. And I'll explain what this is used for. You don't have to use this. A lot of people use like turfus. You can probably use smaller perlite. I would probably not use perlite because it's too light. I would use maybe like a pumice, like a smaller grain pumice. And then the last thing that I need is a spray bottle of water. So here's my spray bottle, and it's just filled with the same water, the tap water that's been acidified, the same water that I used to wet down the soil medium. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to fill these pots with soil. Alright, so I'm just about done filling up the pots with soil. I'm using my little tamper that my dad made for me. So I would recommend that, you see, sometimes when you're using any kind of soil medium, there might be big chunks of stuff in here. I would get rid of the big chunks because these seeds are really, really small. And when they're babies, they're really, really small seedlings. So you just kind of want to give them a good space to get started. So I would remove large chunks of whatever. You know, it could be, maybe you're using cactus soil and there's pumice in it, like large chunks of pumice. You'll want to remove that just for the seeds. My soil is just filled up to about the lip of the pot. I'm ready to place some seeds. I'm going to start with this one, the 10 pack. So when there's only small amounts of seeds, like 10 to 20 seeds, I like to hand place them. It just, you know, why not? There's not that many, and it gives the seeds some space to grow. I'm going to try to see if I can show you how small these copiapoa seeds are. And when they're in these paper envelopes, actually any envelope, you know, you're paying for these seeds, so you want to make sure that you're getting every last seed out of that pack. Let's see if you can see. Can you see how small those seeds are? They are teeny, teeny, tiny. So I have these tweezers. It came with like a gardening set that you can buy off of Amazon. I'm going to hand place these 10 seeds into the 2.5-inch pot. Kind of give them even space. So copiapoa are kind of medium rate growers, I would say. For me, I have only grown so many genus of plants. So for me, they're actually relatively fast growing, especially compared to like Ariocarpus, for example. So when you're sowing these seeds and deciding how to place the seeds in the soil, you got to take into consideration what it is you're growing. And that will kind of tell you whether you need to give the seeds some space to grow. Because if you can imagine, if you sow a ton of seeds of a fast grower and you get good germination, before you know it, you're going to have to repot. And I would say that the best strategy usually is to try to allow the seedlings to stay in their pot for as long as they possibly can. In an ideal world, you would want to give the seeds all the space that they can have, because that means they can stay in that spot for a long time. But in reality, you've got space considerations for yourself. So you want to give them enough space to grow, but not so much space that you need 10 pots for, you know, a pack of seeds. I just realized I have the labels backwards, so I'm going to replace the labels. So don't be like me. These are placed. Next, let me show you the Ariocarpus. So Ariocarpus is a pack of 100. Ariocarpus are pretty slow growers, for especially the seedlings. So I'm not going to care too much about planting too many seeds into one pot. If this was copiapoa, I would probably break it up into 3 or 4 pots. I wouldn't put 100 of them in one pot. They will outgrow it quickly. So these I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle into the pot. Even though I'm sprinkling, I still want to try to get them somewhat evenly spaced, which is kind of impossible. So this is a lot of seeds, but I don't mind the Ariocarpus growing together in a bunch. Plus they don't really have spines, so they're not going to be stabbing each other. Alright, so again, I want to make sure that that envelope is empty. And then when I do sprinkling like this, I'll go in afterwards and try to break up the clumps of seeds that are together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll fast forward and come back. Alright, that's good enough. So the next step is to spray this down with my spray bottle. Remember that cactus are pretty much tropical plants when they're young, so they need a lot of moisture to get started. Alright, so I've sprayed it down. So these seeds really are just sitting on the surface of the soil right now. And if you were to leave them like this and go ahead and put them in an enclosed space where they have humidity, they will germinate like that. And they'll be fine like that, I think, for the most part. However, the problem is that a lot of them will be sideways or they'll be upside down, and you're going to have to go in and right them and probably help their roots hold on to the soil. So the better way to do it, to help them stand upright, is to give them a light layer of this top dressing. So you don't want to use super fine stuff like beach sand, but you don't want it to be so coarse like this really coarse pumice, although people do grow it from this and it might be fine. I just haven't tried that myself. Things have worked well when I use this kind of very, very coarse sand, if you will. So I'll just give it a light layer of this decomposed granite. Again, you don't have to use this as the top dressing. You could use turfus, you could use probably a finer pumice if you wanted to. Maybe even the coarse pumice would work fine. I just haven't tried it again. And what this does is it basically the seeds are sitting under this very, very thin layer of decomposed granite. And so they'll have enough energy to break through this very thin layer, and then their roots will have something to hold on to as they germinate. And this has worked nicely. Now, some of them will still come up sideways or upside down and stuff, so you can go in and help them stand upright. When the seeds are really, really small, like lithop seeds, I've heard that you probably don't even want to put this on top of them. The seeds are just way too small. But for like Ariocarpus and Copiapoa, this has worked well for me. So I have like that very thin layer of decomposed granite. I'm going to give it one more spray of water. And these seeds are ready to say hello to the world. So what I like to do is I like to use a 10-20 tray because I'm going to be, you can see there's a lot of pots here because I'm going to be sowing a lot of seeds. Sorry about the reflection back here. All right, I'm back. I have filled up some more pots with soil and planted more seeds. So one of the trickiest questions to answer is how long do these pots need to stay in the high humidity environment? And there's really not one answer. It's all over the place. Now for me, that could be the case because I don't sanitize anything. So it's possible that I have fungus problems or who knows what. But I've heard individuals who will open up their high humidity area as soon as they get the germination that they want. And then on the other extreme, there's other individuals who will leave them in there for over a year. So it's completely up to you. Now for me, as long as the seedlings aren't having any trouble, I'll leave them in here for as long as they can take it. But if they do start to show trouble, which usually is in the form of rotting or damping off, then I'll go ahead and open up the environment if I see issues like that happening. So if they are rotting off, I'll open it up, let them dry out a bit, and then kind of take it from there. Let me show you some examples of trays and pots that I have sowed earlier. So all of my seedlings then sit indoors in the beginnings of their lives, especially now because it's November and it's a lot cooler outside. If it were the spring right now, then some of the varieties I would be comfortable putting outside in my shade house, actually, at fairly young ages. And I've done that before. I did that earlier this year. So let me show you some seeds that I had sown about 2 months ago in September. These are all Copiapoa. So they're about 2 months old, and you can see various stages of growth in here, kind of all over the place. But these were sown with exactly the method that I showed you. So they are sitting under grow lights. These are just LED grow lights that I bought off of Amazon, and I'll leave a link to the brand and the type that I bought. I'm kind of cheap by nature, so I bought the kind with no dimmer. So instead of being able to control the intensity of my light, I just put pieces of shade cloth or pieces of screen to control how much light gets to the seedlings. But these lights I've had since last year, and they've been doing pretty well for me. So here's an example of some cactus that are growing in the Baggy method. So there's just 1 or 2 pots per bag, and they've been in there for I think at least 2 or 3 months by now. And I just check on them periodically here and there just to make sure they're not rotting. If they start rotting, then I'll start airing out the bags. But so far so good. Here's another tray. It's in various stages of growth, a bunch of different types of plants. More trays. This is my old Obesa seedling, which now is over a year old. These are my Copiapoa, which I've shown in my previous videos. I have had one tragedy now. This was one of my first Copiapoa, Heseltoniana, but it's got a little neighbor next to it. These were all sown with the same method that I showed. So the method for me seems to work well for Copiapoa. Now, does it work for other cactus genus? Kind of up in the air. Astrophytum. More Copiapoa. Okay, here's an example of a pot. I planted probably 25 seeds or more within a 2.5-inch pot. This is Hamadocactus of something, which I can't even see. The label is hidden back here somewhere. These seeds were from Mesa Garden. So this is that trade-off, you know, do you plant a bunch into a small space or do you give them space to grow? So like this needs to be repotted. But if these had been spread out more, then maybe they could stay in the pot even longer, but yeah, it's okay. Like this, for example, this is Copiapoa molecula. And then some of these are doing okay and some of them are not. Like these only have 2 in the pot, so they can stay together for a long time. They don't need to be repotted. Okay, so where to buy seeds? Mesa Garden is a great source of seeds. They have a huge catalog with prices that range anywhere from extremely affordable to much more expensive for the very popular species like Copiapoa cinerea. Those are really expensive. But then you can buy Mammillaria for a couple dollars, you know, for 30 seeds. Or some of them you can even get, I think there's Copiapoa Lembeckii KK70. You can buy a pack of 100 for $6. And this is Lembeckii, my favorite. Another place I really like is 3 Deserts on Etsy, which is Rob Romero's shop. And he has seeds and sometimes he sells live plants as well. And then there's a bunch of sellers on eBay, off Etsy, that you can buy really good seeds from. Another way is if you make some friends who have plants and who have seeds, and like if any of you know me, I have seeds that I don't even have space to grow, lots of Astrophytum seeds. If you have a local cactus society, that's another great source of seeds. Like the Central Arizona Cactus and Succulent Society has its own seed depot. You can get, you know, a pack of seeds for $1. And if you contribute to the seed bank, you can even get discounts on seeds. I mean, that's extremely affordable. And another way to do it is to buy adult plants that are mature enough to be flowering, and you can pollinate them yourself and collect seeds yourself off of your own plant and grow those from seed. Now, oftentimes when we spend, you know, a decent chunk of money on, let's say, like Areocarpus, for example, but they're mature specimens, it means they have a chance to flower. And it means you have a chance to pollinate and to create your own seeds. So that's another great way. Although that might cost a bit more in the initial investment, but it can be well worth it. So let me talk about this equipment here now, the supplies that I use. These are Spider Farmer LED light grow lights. They've worked really well for me. There's a whole bunch of different types of LED lights available on Amazon, so you shop around, find what works for you. I find Spider Farmer to be maybe a little bit on the pricier side, but still very affordable. There are other options out there. I think these use like Samsung LEDs or something, but there are other brands available. Shop around, look at what works for you. Again, I'm cheap, so I bought the ones without the dimmer, and I just control the light intensity usually using shade cloth or screen shade. These trays. So these trays that I use, because I'm growing indoor, so I need to protect my surfaces from water. So these Grow 1020 trays do not have holes in it. These are the heaviest duty trays that Greenhouse Megastore carries. They're probably, I forget how much they are now, but prices are increasing, you know, with inflation and everything. But these are really, really thick and really sturdy. I highly recommend this kind of tray if you're deciding that you want to give growing at a little bit higher volume, you know, beyond just a pot or two. if you're thinking about growing trays, I highly recommend investing in these trays because they will last probably forever. I have some trays like this tray of Copiapoa. I wanted to try growing in a tray rather than in pots just to see what it's like. So these trays are like the maybe heavy duty or medium duty trays from Greenhouse Megastore, which I ordered with holes in them. So there's a tray below it that doesn't have holes, and then this one has holes so that it can drain. These pots, 3-inch and 2.5-inch pots, are all from Greenhouse Megastore. I think it's the black form pots, which I'll put a link below in the description. These are the most affordable pots that I have been able to find on the market, at least for me. They're kind of on the thin side, but as long as you're not squishing them and bending them, they'll last a really, really long time. But if you do squish them, you know, like crease the sides and stuff, they will break. But as long as you don't do that, they will last a long time. And Greenhouse Megastore sells these in cases, so you do have the option to buy a really high quantity of them for relatively affordable price if you want to. So I have cases of these, like, you know, a case of 800 or a case of, I forget, 400 of the maybe 3-inch pots here, because I just don't want to have to worry about running out of pots, as these guys eventually need to be potted up into their own pots. And I forget if you buy, you'll have to look up the prices, but I forget if you can buy like a whole case of maybe 800 pots for $60 or something. You'll have to look it up. Don't trust my memory. So the other thing is, you don't have to sow seeds in these pots. You don't actually have to spend money on any of this stuff. You could just use those, you know, those clear produce trays, you know, that you buy maybe berries and vegetables and other fruits at the grocery store. Just rinse those out. You can use that. If you eat takeout, you know, those takeout containers, you can use that. You can punch holes in them if you want to. I recommend growing the seeds in something with drain holes in them. It just sets them up for later when they're actually larger and, you know, are in open air and need to be watered. Otherwise, you could sow seeds in holeless containers, and they can stay in there for quite a while as long as you're not drowning them with water. But to think about the future of when they're no longer in like germination stage, I would recommend having something with holes in it. But you know, in terms of trays and stuff, you don't have to use 10, 20 trays. You can use takeout containers, you know, to-go containers that don't have holes in them, for example. So there's many ways to get started without having to spend much money. You don't have to buy LED lights, you know. Maybe you can find a small grow light or something with some spectrum that works well for growing plants. But, you know, I went ahead and did this because I'm growing a lot of plants. I like to have a little fan set up indoors just for some air circulation for these plants. Cookie. Now it is November, so what's a good season to sow seeds? You can sow seeds year-round. If you're sowing seeds in the warm season, then you probably don't have to worry about temperature. All you have to consider is humidity. But in the winter time, when it's cool, you might want to use a heat mat. I've got one down here. I think this is a VivoSun heat mat. It's large enough, sorry you can't see it. It's large enough to fit a 1020 tray on it. You can buy it for pretty affordable on Amazon. And I, again, am cheap, so I bought a heat mat that doesn't have a temperature control on it. So the way I control temperature is to put layers of towels between the mat and the tray. And I think getting the soil temperature to be in the upper 70s, low 80s is really ideal for the seeds to germinate. So if you have a heat mat, you can grow all throughout winter. Actually, sowing seeds in the winter is a really good time because things are kind of slowing down in terms of gardening. So this gives you something to do that's related to plants. And by the time that spring rolls around, you know, these guys are already several months old, so they're kind of ready for the nice warmer weather. All times of the year is a good time to sow seeds. So if you notice, I was using these trays to do my potting, and these are really, really nice trays as well. These are from Greenhouse Megastore. They're from a brand called Garland, which is, I think, made in the UK or in England. And they're very, very sturdy plastic trays, and they also have various domes that fit these trays, and they have several sizes of these trays. So if you want to use trays but you don't want to have something that big, you can find smaller ones available. And again, you don't even have to use this. You can even buy, the standard storage containers from any big box stores, and you can use that. That's actually what I started with. For me, when I first began, I was using sauce cups, I was using produce trays, but because I started to grow so many from seed, those irregular shapes were not very space efficient, so I like to use pots. And these become really easy to manage as you have many of them. By the way, these shelves I used to use to store, I also do crafting, and I used to use these shelves to store my crafting equipment and crafting materials and the things that I have made, and obviously I've converted them to growing shelves. And I'm hanging the lights maybe roughly 2 feet or so away from the plants. But when you're growing plants, you just got to keep an eye on them to figure out if the light intensity is too much or too little. It's up to us as individuals to figure out what works for us. So I hope you found that information useful today. There's a lot of information out there. Watch them all. Gather the information that works for you or makes sense to you, and try. And sometimes there's going to be some error in there involved. I've had many failures. But just try things and find out what works for you. And I hope you really enjoy this. It is so much fun to grow cactus from seed. It's extremely rewarding and at times very stressful. But that combination of reward and stress, I think, is what makes it so much fun. So take care, you all. I hope to talk to you next time. Bye-bye.